This is a question that comes up quite frequently, particularly from kids. If you haven't heard it before, it goes like this. Why do they call a kookaburra and not a snake eater? After all, these birds eat snakes, don't they? Well, let's find out. As many as 250 million people around the world call Australia home. But here's the thing. If you were to ask each one of them what animal best represents Australia, chances are you'd get the same answer from nearly every single one of them. The kangaroo, the platypus, the koala, or the kookaburra. And since we're talking about the kookaburra today, let's start at the beginning. What actually is a kookaburra? Well, despite their size, which can be anywhere from 40 centimeters to 65 centimeters long, including their tail, kookaburras aren't actually classified as a bird of prey. Instead, they're related to our fishy friends, the kingfishers. Now, don't get me wrong. Just because they're related to kingfishers does not mean kookaburras spend their days catching fish and hanging out by rivers and streams. In fact, that's not really true of most kingfishers either. But it is true of some species such as the common kingfisher found throughout Europe and parts of Asia. This bird really does catch fish. In Australia, there are only 2 types of kingfishers that regularly catch and eat fish. These are the magnificent and resplendent kingfishers. The other 5 species of Australian kingfishers have adapted to life on land where they catch and eat insects. The kookaburra, with its blue and white checkered back and black-barred belly, falls into this category. So while kookaburras are technically speaking kingfishers, we should also remember that the name kingfisher isn't referring to a type of diet, but rather a particular adaptation these birds have. It's their big, broad, flat bill, which is perfect for spearing fish. But I said that kookaburras are also known for their big bills. And that's correct. Their bills are large and heavy, but they're not flat like those of their fishy cousins. The shape of their bill is better suited to cracking open hard shells. So what do they crack open? Pretty much anything that gets in their way. In fact, it's this toughness that allows kookaburras to tackle one of the toughest prey items imaginable, the snake. Now I know what you're thinking. If they eat snakes, then why wouldn't they be venomous? Well, that's an excellent question, but unfortunately, I don't have an excellent answer for you. You see, there's absolutely no evidence to suggest that any native Australian kookaburras are venomous. And I think it's pretty safe to say that if they were, we would know about it by now. We know how dangerous some of these birds can be to humans and other animals. For example, did you know that the laughing kookaburra is responsible for the most recorded attacks on humans out of any Australian bird? On average, they attack around 3 times more people per year than the next most aggressive Australian bird, the red-necked stint. To put that into perspective, stints are usually only around 10 centimeters tall, whereas the kookaburra is several times larger. The point is, if kookaburras were venomous, we'd definitely know about it. But they're not. So let's go ahead and bust that myth right now. If you've ever been attacked by a kookaburra, please contact me so I can investigate. Back to the snakes. One of the main reasons that kookaburras can eat snakes is their diet. It's not only tough enough to handle the occasional snake, but their food also includes hard-shelled insects like beetles and their larvae, as well as the eggs of various birds. In fact, according to a study conducted in southeastern Australia, over a period of 12 months, 73% of their diet consisted of invertebrates and only 27% was made up of vertebrates. Of that 27%, less than half was made up of snakes, other reptiles, amphibians, and mammals. In other words, the majority of a kookaburra's diet consists of insects, not snakes. That being said, it's still pretty impressive that they're willing to eat snakes at all. That's because snakes are an excellent source of nutrition for kookaburras, especially when there are fewer insects around. Researchers have discovered that when there are lots of insects around, kookaburras switch from mostly eating insects to mostly eating reptiles. Basically, they'll eat whatever is most abundant. And that makes sense. After all, they need to eat a lot. A typical kookaburra needs to eat between 500 grams and 1 kilogram of food each day, depending on how active it is and whether or not it's breeding. Kookaburras are also known as the bush alarm clock because they love to call at dawn and dusk. They have dozens of different calls, but perhaps the most famous is their loud, raucous laughter. You can hear them calling from miles away, and it sounds something like this. When it comes to taking down snakes, though, kookaburras don't exactly do it with their voice. Instead, they use their beaks and their feet. Kookaburras will attack snakes both in the air and on the ground, and although they're primarily ambush predators, they're perfectly capable of chasing down a wriggling snake if necessary. In the end, it's not all that different to how they catch their other prey. They swoop down and grab it in their beak before flying off to a high vantage point where they can safely eat. The reason that kookaburras love to eat snakes is that they're incredibly good at controlling pest populations. For example, one study found that in agricultural regions of Australia, kookaburras reduce rodent numbers by 96%. That's why many farmers and landholders put up nesting boxes in an effort to attract these helpful birds onto their property. And this ability to control pests isn't just limited to the ground. Kookaburras are highly effective at targeting agricultural pests in crops. For example, in cotton crops, they reduce the number of insect pests by 80%. And in vineyards, they can reduce the number of pests by as much as 57%. So if they're so good at controlling pests and they eat snakes, why wouldn't they be considered Australia's primary snake-eating bird? Well, it's because they're not. Yes, they eat snakes, but they're certainly not the most enthusiastic snake-eating birds out there. In fact, the vast majority of their diet consists of insects. Sure, they'll eat snakes if they come across them, but if there aren't any snakes around, you won't see them wasting time slithering around in the grass looking for one. Instead, they'll simply turn their attention to the next best source of nutrition, insects. In other words, it's not so much that they're called kookaburras and not snake eaters. It's more that they're called kookaburras, and they do happen to eat snakes. But with all that said, I think it's safe to say that without the kookaburra, Australia would be a very different place. They're intelligent, beautiful, curious, feisty, and brave. Plus, they keep our parks, farms, and gardens free of pests. So the next time you hear one laughing in the morning, take a moment to appreciate what a truly unique and remarkable animal it is. Now, if you want to learn more about Australia's incredible wildlife, check out this playlist here. You might also like this video. And finally, thanks so much for watching. I've been your host. See you next time.